The untold story of a janitor who died a millionaire. His secret will change your life. What if I told you that the man pushing this mop cart through the halls of a Vermont library for 38 years was secretly accumulating a fortune of $8 million? What if I revealed that his co-workers, who felt sorry for him because he wore the same threadbare coat for decades, had no idea they were looking at one of the wealthiest men in their town? This is the true story of Ronald Read, a man who never earned more than $20,000 per year, never owned a computer, never had a financial advisor, and never read a single investment book. Yet when he died at age 92, he left behind a fortune that shocked an entire community and revealed a wealth-building secret so simple that anyone can use it, but so overlooked that 99% of people never will. His story will either inspire you to completely rethink what you believe about money, success, and the power of ordinary choices, or it will haunt you with the realization of how much wealth you've been walking past every single day without even noticing. Stay with me, because what Ronald knew about money will shatter everything you think you know about getting rich. Picture this: a small town in Vermont, population 4,000, where everyone knows everyone's business, or so they thought. For nearly 4 decades, the residents of Brattleboro watched Ronald Read trudge to work each morning in his beat-up Toyota, carrying a lunch packed in a used paper bag, wearing clothes that looked like they belonged in a thrift store donation bin. His neighbors whispered about the poor old janitor who never seemed to have $2 to rub together. But on June 2, 2014, when Ronald's will was read aloud in a packed courthouse, the gasps were audible. The man they had pitied for his apparent poverty had just donated $1.2 million to the local hospital and $4.8 million to the library where he had worked, keeping $2 million for relatives who had no idea they were about to become wealthy. The total estate, $8 million from a janitor who made minimum wage. Ronald's story isn't just about one man's hidden wealth. It's about the invisible opportunity that surrounds every single person watching this video right now. It's about the profound difference between looking rich and being rich, between earning a lot and keeping a lot, between financial complexity and financial wisdom. Most importantly, it's about a wealth-building strategy so simple that a janitor with an 8th grade education could master it, yet so powerful that it created generational wealth. If you've ever felt like building real wealth is impossible without a high income, advanced education, or insider knowledge, Ronald's story will prove you wrong in the most beautiful way possible. Hit that notification bell, because what you're about to discover isn't just inspiring, it's actionable, and it starts working from $1. The Invisible Man: How Ronald Mastered the Art of Financial Camouflage. Ronald James Read was born in 1921 in rural Vermont, to a family so poor that finishing 8th grade was considered an achievement. His first job was pumping gas for 25 cents an hour, and for the next 25 years, he worked as a mechanic at a local gas station. When the station closed in 1963, Ronald, then 42 years old, took a job as a janitor at the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, later transferring to the Brooks Memorial Library, where he would work until retirement at age 75. What made Ronald extraordinary wasn't his income. He never earned more than $20,000 per year, even in his final working years. What made him extraordinary was his complete indifference to appearing successful. While his co-workers bought new cars, updated their wardrobes, and financed lifestyle upgrades, Ronald drove the same beat-up Toyota for decades, wore clothes until they literally fell apart, and lived in a small, modest home that he had purchased for $12,000 in the 1960s. But here's what nobody understood. Ronald wasn't cheap because he was poor. He was cheap because he was building wealth. Every dollar that his peers spent on looking successful, Ronald invested in actually becoming successful. While they were making car payments, he was buying dividend-paying stocks. While they were shopping for new clothes, he was reading annual reports in the library where he worked. While they were financing their lifestyles, he was funding his future. Ronald's financial camouflage was so complete that when co-workers occasionally offered to buy him lunch out of sympathy, he would graciously accept, not because he couldn't afford it, but because spending someone else's money meant keeping more of his own money invested. His beat-up appearance wasn't a sign of financial struggle. It was evidence of financial discipline that most people mistake for poverty. The psychological genius of Ronald's approach was that by looking poor, he removed all social pressure to spend money on status symbols. Nobody expected expensive gifts from him. Nobody invited him to costly social events. And nobody judged him for living below his means because everyone assumed he had no means. This social invisibility became his greatest financial asset. Most importantly, Ronald understood something that escapes most high earners. Wealth isn't about how much money you make. It's about how much money you keep and grow. A janitor who invests 80% of his income will always become wealthier than a lawyer who spends 110% of his income, regardless of the income difference. Ronald proved that financial success isn't about earning more. It's about wanting less while investing the difference systematically. The compound obsession, how $25 became $8 million. Ronald's wealth-building strategy was so simple it sounds almost stupid. He bought dividend-paying stocks of companies whose products he used every day, and he never sold them. That's it. No complex trading strategies, no hot stock tips, no market timing. Just buying shares of companies like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, CVS, and Colgate-Palmolive, then letting compound interest work its magic for 50-plus years. His first investment was $25 worth of stock in a company whose products he saw customers buying at the gas station where he worked. Instead of spending that $25 on lunch for a week, Ronald bought a piece of a business that would pay him dividends every quarter for the rest of his life. That single $25 investment, reinvested continuously, eventually grew into thousands of dollars through the miracle of compound growth. But here's where Ronald's genius really showed. He treated every dividend payment like found money that immediately got reinvested into more shares. While most people view dividends as income to spend, Ronald viewed them as seeds to plant for even more dividends. This created an exponential snowball effect. More shares generated more dividends, which bought more shares, which generated even more dividends in an endless cycle of wealth multiplication. The numbers are staggering when you understand the timeline. Ronald invested roughly $300–400 per month, nearly his entire paycheck after basic living expenses, for 50 years. But because he never touched the principal and consistently reinvested all dividends, that $180,000–, $240,000 in total contributions grew into $8 million. The compound interest earned more than 30 times his initial investment. Money making money, year after year, decade after decade. Ronald's investment philosophy was beautifully simple. Buy what you understand. Buy what people need, and never sell unless the company fundamentally changes. He owned shares in companies that made soap, toothpaste, medicine, and food, products that people would need regardless of economic conditions. This gave him the confidence to hold through market crashes, recessions, and periods when his friends thought he was crazy for not cashing out. The psychological advantage of Ronald's approach was that it removed emotion from investing. He wasn't trying to time the market or find the next hot stock. He was simply buying pieces of boring businesses that paid him to own them. When markets crashed, he kept buying. When markets soared, he kept buying. When financial experts predicted doom, he kept buying. This mechanical, emotion-free approach to investing is exactly what allowed compound interest to work its magic uninterrupted for 5 decades. The paradox of simple wealth. Why easy strategies are hard to follow. The most frustrating aspect of Ronald's story is how incredibly simple his strategy was, and how incredibly difficult most people find it to replicate. Ronald never used complex financial instruments, never hired expensive advisors, never tried to outsmart the market, and never chased get-rich-quick schemes. He just bought quality stocks consistently and held them forever. Yet despite this simplicity, 99% of people will never achieve what Ronald achieved. Not because they can't understand his strategy, but because they can't stick to it. The first psychological barrier is what I call complexity bias, the human tendency to believe that significant results require complicated methods. When people hear Ronald's story, their first reaction is often, "That's it? Just buy stocks and hold them?" They're disappointed by the simplicity because it feels too easy to create millionaire-level wealth. This causes them to seek more complex strategies that feel more sophisticated but produce inferior results. The second barrier is lifestyle inflation syndrome. As most people's income increases, their spending increases proportionally or faster. Ronald's income barely changed over 50 years, but his investment contributions increased because his lifestyle expenses stayed flat. Most people do the opposite. They keep lifestyle expenses growing while keeping investment contributions flat. This single difference explains why high earners stay broke while low earners like Ronald become wealthy. The third barrier is impatience with compound interest. Ronald's strategy required decades to produce millionaire results. But we live in a culture that expects instant gratification. People want to see significant account growth within months or years, not decades. When their $500 monthly investment doesn't make them rich in 5 years, they quit or chase higher risk strategies that usually fail. Ronald understood that wealth building is boring for decades before it becomes exciting forever. The fourth barrier is social pressure to consume. Ronald's co-workers never pressured him to spend money because they assumed he didn't have any. Most people face constant social pressure to maintain appearances, upgrade lifestyles, and demonstrate success through consumption. This social pressure to spend prevents the systematic investing that creates actual wealth. The final barrier is market volatility panic. Ronald lived through multiple market crashes, recessions, and periods when his portfolio lost 30–50% of its value on paper. But because he understood that stock ownership represents business ownership, not gambling chips, he never panicked and sold during downturns. Instead, he viewed market crashes as sales, where he could buy more shares of quality companies at discounted prices. Ronald's story reveals that building wealth isn't about finding the perfect strategy. It's about finding a good strategy and following it consistently for decades, regardless of market conditions, social pressure, or psychological discomfort. The legacy lesson. What Ronald's final act teaches about true wealth. The most powerful part of Ronald's story isn't how he built his wealth, it's what he did with it. When Ronald died at 92, he could have left his $8 million to relatives who barely knew him, or he could have spent it on decades of luxury he had denied himself. Instead, he chose to donate most of it to the hospital that had employed him and the library where he had worked, ensuring his wealth would continue serving his community long after his death. This final act reveals something profound about Ronald's relationship with money that most people never understand. Ronald didn't build wealth to buy things. He built wealth to buy freedom, security, and ultimately, the ability to make a meaningful impact. His millions weren't about personal consumption, they were about personal values. The same discipline that prevented him from buying unnecessary luxuries during his lifetime enabled him to give away life-changing amounts after his death. The hospital where Ronald worked used his $1.2 million donation to upgrade critical care equipment that has since saved countless lives. The library where he spent his final working years used his $4.8 million gift to expand programming, update technology, and ensure free access to information for future generations. Ronald's wealth became a force multiplier for good that will impact his community for decades. But perhaps the most important lesson from Ronald's legacy is what it reveals about the true nature of financial security. Ronald never worried about market crashes, job security, or economic uncertainty because he had built a system that generated income regardless of external circumstances. His dividend payments provided more annual income than he needed to live, which gave him complete freedom from financial anxiety. This freedom was more valuable than any luxury he could have purchased. The psychological transformation that comes from achieving Ronald-level financial security is something most people never experience. When your investments generate more income than your expenses, work becomes optional rather than necessary. When you have decades of living expenses saved and invested, economic uncertainty becomes interesting rather than terrifying. When you can afford anything you want but choose to want very little, you achieve a form of wealth that transcends money. Ronald's story challenges everything our culture teaches about success, happiness, and the good life. He proved that a person can live richly on very little while building vast wealth through simple consistency. He demonstrated that the highest form of financial success isn't buying everything you want. It's wanting so little that you can give away everything you don't need to make the world better than you found it. Ronald Read's story proves that building extraordinary wealth doesn't require extraordinary circumstances. It requires extraordinary consistency applied to ordinary opportunities. Every day for 50 years, Ronald chose to invest instead of spend, to build instead of consume, to think long-term instead of seeking immediate gratification. These daily choices, invisible to everyone around him, compounded into a fortune that most high earners never achieved despite making 10 times his salary. The most beautiful lesson from Ronald's life isn't about money, it's about values. He proved that wealth isn't about having enough money to buy anything you want. It's about wanting so little that you can afford everything you need and still have plenty left to give away. His threadbare coat wasn't a sign of poverty. It was evidence of priorities that transcended material possessions and focused on building something meaningful. Right now, you have the same opportunity Ronald had in 1963 when he started his journey. The stock market is still there, compound interest still works, and quality companies still pay dividends to their shareholders. The only question is whether you'll have Ronald's discipline to live below your means while systematically investing the difference for decades, regardless of what others think about your choices. Ronald's strategy wasn't just about building wealth. It was about building character. Every day he chose delayed gratification over immediate pleasure, substance over appearance, and values over validation. The $8 million was just the monetary expression of 50 years of small, disciplined decisions that most people aren't willing to make. His wealth was the natural result of his character, not the cause of it. The janitor who died a millionaire left more than money. He left a blueprint that anyone can follow. His story is your invitation to stop waiting for perfect circumstances, higher income, or market timing, and start building wealth with whatever you have, wherever you are, right now. The question isn't whether Ronald's strategy works, it's whether you'll work Ronald's strategy long enough to see the extraordinary results of ordinary consistency. If Ronald's story moved you, if you felt that deep recognition that true wealth comes from discipline, not income, smash that like button right now, because this message needs to reach everyone who's been told they don't earn enough to build real wealth. Subscribe and hit that notification bell if you're ready to start thinking like Ronald thought, investing like Ronald invested, and building the kind of financial freedom that transforms not just your bank account, but your entire relationship with money and meaning. Comment below and tell me what you're willing to sacrifice today to build the wealth Ronald built. Because public commitment is the first step toward private transformation, and don't let this inspiration fade into just another good story you heard once. Click that next video now, because YouTube knows exactly what you need to hear next to turn Ronald's example into your own extraordinary financial journey. Your future millionaire self is waiting for you to take the first step, and that step starts with the very next video on your screen.